In this demo, we'll look at the object storage services available in IBM Bluemix, and in particular, we'll look at the REST API based on OpenStack Swift that you use to interact with these services. So we'll run through a typical cycle of operations, including creating a container, uploading an object, downloading an object, listing the contents of a container, getting the metadata associated with a container, and so on. So let's get started by logging into Bluemix. So here we are in our Bluemix dashboard. Let's go ahead and create a application and then bind an instance of object storage to it that we can use to run through our demo. So I'll click Create App, and I'll use the Node.js template. So our app is running. Let's go back to our dashboard and we'll select our app. Now let's go ahead and add an instance of the object storage service to our app. This is in the data category. And notice that we have two versions of the object storage. Version 1 is designed to be used by Bluemix applications and will only get credentials when it's actually bound to an application instance. Version 2 is designed for more universal use, so it can be used inside a Bluemix app, but it can also be used externally as well. And this instance will get credentials as soon as you create a new instance. So this will be useful for situations where you may be running virtual machines or Docker images within the IBM Containers framework and not necessarily have the instance bound to the running app. So we'll go ahead and create an instance of version 1 because for what we're trying to do, simply exercise the REST API. This one is actually easier. It uses basic authentication. Version 2 of the service uses a more sophisticated authentication mechanism known as Keystone. And we do want to restage our application. So our app is now restaged. We can go back to the dashboard. Let's go ahead and select the app again. And now we want to look at the credentials of this instance of object storage that's bound to our app. And as you can see, there is important information that we need to note here so that we can actually exercise the REST API. So there's an authentication URI, there's a username, and there's a password. And those are the most important pieces of information we'll need to first authenticate against our instance and then run through some of the more common REST API calls available via the Object Storage Swift API. So with our credentials in hand, let's go ahead and exercise the REST API. So the first thing we'll do is we'll use an app extension to Chrome called Postman. And the first thing we have to do is actually authenticate. So we need to go back to our credentials and grab the values. So we need the authentication URI followed by the actual username. And then we need to use basic authentication with the username and password that we got back when we bound the instance of object storage to our app. So with all this in place, I can go ahead and send the request. And there's no response received, but as you can see, I got a HTTP header back in the response. And this has two really important pieces of information. One is the authentication token that I'll have to use for subsequent requests, and also the URL that I'll have to use for subsequent requests. So let's go ahead and start another tab. Go back to the old tab, and grab the URL. And also the auth token. So after we've got the auth token and the storage URL, in order to create a container, we actually need the name of the container. So I'll call it my container, and we'll go ahead and exercise that. And you can see we got back a 201, means it's been successfully created, and there's some more information in the header. Next, let's take a look at getting some metadata about the container. So that can be done via a head request. So we'll go ahead and do a head request with the same auth token in the header and the same container name. And as you can see, we've received the metadata back. So let's go ahead and upload a file now using the same setup. And we'll use a put. We'll use the same container, my container, same authentication, the same token. We also need to actually specify the object that we need to upload, and we need to include that in the body of the request. So let's go ahead and do that. And what I'll do is I'll pick a random file from my computer. So that's the name of the file. But then I also have to go to the URL and append the file name there as well. Now these two don't necessarily have to match, but typically you would want to keep your files that you uploaded with the same name. So again, so I have my container, I have my actual file name, I have the contents of the file in the body of the request. So now I can go ahead and send my request. And as you can see, I get a 201 and it's been created. So now let's go ahead and do a get to check that particular container. I'll get rid of the name of the file and I'll send the request. And by default, this container listing gives me a plain listing of files, but I can also specify different formats. For example, I can say format is JSON, and if I do that, see, I get a JSON document actually with more information. Let's go ahead and see how we would actually download the file. So we're going to go back to our put request that we did before. There it is. And we're just doing this because it has all the information that we need. But we actually want to do a get. Headers are exactly the same. So if I do a get with the container name and actual file name, when I do a send, it actually returns the data in the file. And then finally, let's show you how to do a delete, which is, as you would expect, an HTTP delete operation. And we need to make sure that we actually have the name of the file, to make sure that we have our token, and then we can actually send it. And it returns a 204, meaning it was successful, but it's not actually returning anything. And if we go back to our container and send a list request, you can see that we got nothing back. So there's nothing in our container because we had one object in it, we deleted it, and we don't have anything in the container anymore. And that was a basic run through of the various API calls. And that was a basic run through of some of the API calls that you can make using the Swift API. So just to recap, showed you how to get container metadata using a head request. We showed you how to upload an object using a put request, how to get a listing of a container using a get request, and we showed you how to do that in plain format and also in JSON format. We showed you how to delete objects using a delete request. We also looked at downloading objects that had been uploaded previously and creating new containers. And hopefully that gave you sort of a feel for the basics of the API. Of course, this can all be done programmatically, so you could write an application that actually used object storage as a file storage mechanism, and then you could actually use any HTTP library available to you in whatever programming environment you're using in order to make these API calls. And that's it for a demo. Thank you.